This Paul George situation has kind of blown my mind. Typically, when something this big happens, you can see on my channel, I immediately post about it. I've got a video up within an hour and a half. Really wanted to kind of sit and think on this one a little bit though, because I'm really struggling to understand exactly what just happened. So obviously we know that Paul George signed with the Philadelphia 76ers, 4 years, 212, full 4-year max contract, a contract that the Clippers were not willing to give him. They could have given him a little bit more money, but they did not want to give him the 4th year. Philly was willing to do the 4th year, and Paul George is now going to be playing alongside Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. And that is extremely exciting to me. I think that is a perfect fit because he can kind of be in and out of these games. You're not relying on Paul George to be this like primary creator. You're not relying on him to be the best offensive option. If the team is fully healthy, this is a perfect fit for Paul George. And arguably, given some of the other additions that Philly has made, as well as the ability to continue to add some pieces, they are, them, the Knicks, and then the Celtics above them, those are the best teams in the East going into next year. They're real conference finals and finals contenders, depending on health. And I can totally understand what some people are saying right now about not loving the contract for Paul George. Some people even going as far as to say that it's going to be one of the worst contracts in the league here in a couple of seasons. I can understand the hesitancy to add him. But here's what I would say to people who are saying that this is a terrible contract. What would you have done? What would the other option have been? Because if they don't get Paul George, they have to sign Tyrese Maxey to an extension. They have to do all these other things. This was the offseason in which they were going to have cap space. So it was going to be like, hey, let's give KCP $30 million and someone else $20, and then we have these pieces and we at least can trade those guys away, maybe get more cap space, trade them out for a star. Or we go out and get Paul George. I understand not wanting to give him the 4th year, but I don't understand what the other option here was supposed to be for Philadelphia. The most efficient thing that they could have done is to just take in a perfect 3rd star alongside Maxey and Embiid in Paul George and not give up anything. Like, yeah, the contract might not be great in 2 seasons. I'm totally willing to admit that the last 2 years of this contract are probably not going to be great. But you know who clearly doesn't care about that? The Philadelphia 76ers. Daryl Morey has a history of this, going back to, bringing back, I should say, Chris Paul, handful of other guys. He wants his stars. He wants to try and push for a title. And if the last 2 years of the deal aren't great, he can trade the guy or he can just deal with it and eat the rest of the contracts. And if you're the Sixers, this is a 2-year window anyway. Like Joel Embiid, it's not like Joel Embiid's 24. He might only be an MVP caliber guy for 2 more seasons anyway. And at that point, you have Maxey to kind of take some things over. But this is just the price that you pay to get Paul George away from a situation that I truly don't think he wanted to leave. I think if the Clippers had offered Paul George a 4th year on his contract, he would have been with the Clippers. So if you're Philadelphia and you have max cap space, you've been planning it for this for 2 years, and your options are overpay a little bit for Paul George or get KCP at $30 million a year, I think the answer there is pretty clear. I'm not that worried about the contract. I'm not that worried about how bad it's going to be in a couple of seasons because Embiid's probably only going to be good enough for you to be a real contender for the next 2 seasons anyway. And this is a franchise that is absolutely desperate for playoff success. They haven't had it. Like, they are real conference finals and finals contenders. Morey is desperate to win a title, something that he's never done. He's never made the finals either. And this is a kind of move that you make when you have the opportunity to, when you have a small window. Two things can be true. It can be a bad contract in the long term for Paul George, and it can still be the correct decision for Philadelphia to bring him in. Now, for the Clippers, this is the part that I do not understand, and I don't really understand how anybody could explain it to me and make it make sense. If you are giving Kawhi an extension a year ago, and you're giving James Harden a new contract, 2 years, 70, why are you just okay with losing Paul George for absolutely nothing? Because there's only two options here. Only 2 things happened here. Either the Clippers looked at the situation and decided, we're fine losing Paul George. We have Kawhi, we have Harden, we have some other guys. We're totally okay with that guy playing for a new basketball team next year. We're fine with it. We don't want to give him the contract. Or 2, they truly didn't think he was going to leave. They really felt like they could play hardball on the 4th year on the contract. They didn't feel the need to go out and really make that competitive offer. And they were just surprised that Philly was willing to do it, and they lost Paul George. They didn't mean to. It wasn't on purpose. It just happened. And Paul George called their bluff, and he's gone. There's only 1 or 2 things happen there. And in either scenario, it is massive franchise mismanagement, in my opinion, because yes, we've already talked about all the risks of the Paul George contract, and I can understand the Clippers not wanting to give him a 4th year. It's not like this has been a successful team. It's not like, these guys are ever healthy together. I totally get that. But every move they've made since they brought in Kawhi, since they brought in Paul George, has been about constantly pushing for a title, constantly adding more salary, bringing in Harden, even, less than a year ago, continually giving these guys new contracts. So if that mindset carried over to Kawhi and James Harden, why did that mindset stop at giving Paul George a 4th year on his contract? Now, part of that is Kawhi didn't get 4 years, he got 3. James Harden only got 2. So they were just like, hey, dude, we kind of want you to be on the same timeline as these other guys. Could you just not take the 4th year? And Paul George wasn't willing to. He felt like a team would do it, and he was 100% correct. And if you were going to get to this point, if you're the Clippers, and you're going to be so frustrated with the way the team has performed, you're going to be so concerned about how much money you're spending, the second apron, all that stuff. If you're going to get to that point, then shouldn't you have been at that point a year ago, 2 years ago, like multiple playoff disappointments ago? Why is this the offseason in which you finally decided that it is no longer worth it to take the risk of the 4th year on Paul George? Which makes me think that they truly did not believe he was going to leave. Like, up until yesterday, basically, they probably thought, hey, this guy's going to come back. He's going to come crawling back to us because no team would give him the 4th year and he wants to stay in LA. And I really think that if no team had given Paul George the 4th year, he would have come back to the Clippers. It was going to take the 4th year, as I talked about in the Sixers section. That's what it was going to take to get him to leave LA, to leave the Clippers, to go to a location situation that, honestly, I don't think he really wanted to go to, but he was willing to do that for the 4th year. And the Clippers just thought he was going to come crawling back, take 3 years, and they were going to be in this perfect situation. And they almost tried to make it too perfect. Like, clearly this is the decision they made, but would you truly rather not have Paul George at all, rather than have Paul George on a 4-year contract instead of 3? Is the 4th year that big of a deal? You're already willing to do a 3-year max. It's not like there's a massive difference in the Philly contract compared to the Clippers. They were both max contracts. It's not like the Clippers were offering him $25 a year. They just didn't want to do the 4th year. And maybe at a certain point, it just got untenable. Like the situation was just not able to be solved. It was a tough contract negotiation, something they've been dealing with for like a year at this point. And then once it became clear that Philly was an option, Paul George took that option. I'd be really curious to see and find out over the next couple of days if at any point Paul George went back to the Clippers and said, hey, I'm seriously going to sign with the Sixers. Are you sure you don't want to give me the 4th year? It doesn't feel like that's what happened, but I truly can't understand. I know that some people are going to say that it's a good idea for the Clippers to let the guy leave. Well, if you're going to let the guy leave, then you should have tried to do what the Nets did to get the picks back in, kind of a version of the Mikal Bridges trade. Like, if you're going to lose Paul George, then you might as well just be bad, because you are kind of like semi-contenders with Paul George on the roster if that roster is fully healthy. And without him, you're certainly not contenders. So why not just blow the whole thing up? Like, obviously they're going into the new building next year, and that's why they've been continually pushing and adding these new contracts and constantly trading away assets. So again, why the change in mindset? That's the thing that I truly don't understand. This is pretty unprecedented when you look throughout the history of the league of teams that kind of not necessarily like went all in, but continually added pieces year after year after year, and then just decided, we don't really want to re-sign one of our best players. This like almost never happens. Now, granted, this is a new NBA that we live in now. I mean, the second apron, all this stuff in the new CBA is definitely scaring teams. It's why, like, you typically don't see a team like the Nuggets just lose KCP in free agency because they don't want to re-sign him to a big enough contract. That's not normal. And a lot of the deals that we've seen so far in free agency have definitely been more conservative in terms of years and money. And so maybe that's the answer, is the new CBA, the second apron, all that stuff. It just scared the Clippers. They were always willing to go all in, go all in, go all in. But once they realized what a 4th year was truly going to mean, bringing back Paul George, they just decided they would rather not have him. They'd rather move forward with Harden and Kawhi and figure it out later. It's a situation that I truly can't understand. I get it from Philly's perspective, even with the risk. I think it's a great move for them. And if I'm a Clippers fan, if I'm in the front office, I'm waking up this morning and thinking, what just happened? How did we just lose someone who's still an all-NBA caliber player at times when healthy for absolutely nothing? So moving forward, clearly the story of this is going to be, is Paul George going to be healthy, and is Embiid going to be healthy? Because if they are, and they go into a postseason series, there's nobody in the Eastern Conference they can't beat if they're healthy with this roster they've put together. And for the Clippers, maybe you start looking at trading James Harden, maybe you start looking at trading Kawhi for some of your picks back from Oklahoma City. I have no idea, but I just truly cannot understand the direction that this move is putting them in.